I'd like to share with you something I've been working on, and this is an online Bible. What's different about it is it loads the whole Bible into memory. So if I do a search like Jesus, it goes straight to the New Testament. And so every time I press a key, it's updating the search. So when I've got nothing in, it shows the whole Bible all the way down to kind of Revelation at the bottom. And then as I type, it's kind of filtering along. So if I do Peter, we're straight into the New Testament. And so at the moment, it's searching for whole words. So here we've got trumpeters, but I could do full words, and then it goes to the New Testament, shows Peter. Often it's most useful to search for part words because you've got lots of suffixes to things. And you can also do quoted searches. So if I do this, then in the BGINNI beginning, it's finding the exact phrase in the beginning, and then I can do an and with that. So if I do word, it's finding all the verses which have the exact phrase in the beginning, but also have the word in them. So in the beginning, and then later in the verse, we've got word, and then 1 John 1, we've got in the beginning was the word. Now we can qualify the searches by arranging here. So if I do John in the beginning and word in the whole book of John, and if I delete the search, it gives me the whole book of John. So John, right down to the last chapter. Let's just go down here. So the end of the book of John. If I do John 1, it gives me the whole chapter. If I do John 1, verse 5, you get just verse 5. I can do 5 to 6. Then it gives me that range of 5 to 7. Or I can do 5,7, and it gives me, kind of understands the use of commas and things like that. And then I could add another comma on here. So I could do and 2, 4. So that gives me John 1, 5, 7, and chapter 2, verse 4, or like 4 to 9. And so you can have quite arbitrary ranges in here in this kind of way that you find them in commentaries. It will recognize, different versions of John. So I could say JHN, and that's fine as well, or JN, and that's good too. So you can also use minus, so JOHN, and if I do here, it's going to give me John, because I've left this range open, it's going to go John to the end of Revelation. So that gives you a way of searching like the whole New Testament. Or I could do John to Rev, and that would do the same thing. Or I could do John 1, and then forward, and that gives me to the end of the book of John. So there we go, the end of the book of John. So let's say I'm interested in the writings of John and Genesis 1 to 3. There's a lot of common language in those. So it draws on the same themes of light, of darkness, and all these kind of things. So here I've done a range which is Genesis 1 to 3, John, 1 John to 3 John, and Revelation. So that's all the writings of John. And so if I search for beginning in there, so it gives me all the references to beginning in Genesis and in John, and I can do, say, light as well. So there's a lot of talk of light in John and Genesis 1 to 3, 1 John to 3 John, and those kind of things. So it's quite good for searching out these kind of ranges. And you could also have like just a verse list that you're interested in sharing with somebody. So you could type in a very long verse list or create a verse list and put it in here, and then you'll see those verses in there. So So the other thing you could do is just have a verse list as well that you wanted to see without any kind of search term. So I could just do like John 1:1, comma, Jen 1:1, and that gives me those two verses. But you could paste 100 verses in there, and maybe if you're preaching or something like that, and you've got all the verses that you want to preach from, then you'd have them all written down there. I'll put in various things to make it easier to build these kind of word lists and things as well. And this is really just like a Bible component that I want to use in lots of different places. The next thing I want to do is to make it so that two people can be sharing this online, so that as one person is typing things in or putting in a word list, then the other person can see it immediately. And then to combine that with sound so that you can do a kind of online Bible study where you can share with somebody and speak to them, and be both seeing the same thing in the Bible. So it's quite helpful for like sermon creation and things like that, because you can just you can search for a term very, very quickly, and it will come up with all the verses for it, and then restrict that range as well, so that you see it in a certain book or something like that. So I found it quite a quick tool. Oh, the other really interesting thing in this, so let's say we've searched for wrath, and you'll come up with some verses which are helpful and some verses which are maybe not helpful for what you're looking at. But I've got this peak thing in it. So if you click on a verse, you'll see this arrow comes up above and below. So you click on it and then you click up, and it will show you the verse above, so you can keep going up and get context on a verse. And I found this to be really quick when you're doing like a word search or something like that. And the same below, so you can expand that there, and then bring that back in. And also you can use arrow keys. So up arrow, so you click on a verse, up arrow is going to give you verses above, down arrow. So really easy to expand them, and left and right do above and below for seeing context. And you can leave as many of these open as you want. So if I click on this one, then I can get some context on that verse as well. So I've got some context on this verse here. So I'm sharing this now. It's not like finished. It's still work in progress, and it's really made to be combined with other things like notes sections and other things that you might want to share with people. But I thought I'd share it so I can get some feedback, and I'd encourage you to have a go at using it. The main version that I'm using here is the MLV. So unfortunately, I can only kind of use free versions at the moment. I might try and get permission for some other versions. So there's the King James in there. There's also the WEB. The MLV I find is quite an interesting version because it's based on the Textus Receptus, which is the same as the King James, but it's slightly more modern than the King James. The New King James has all the disadvantages of like modern translations, because it's taken from different texts and things like that, and it's got some very bad translations in there. The MLV is probably kind of what the New King James should have been. And another thing that I've done in this, so in all translations, this is a very word for word kind of translation. I think they basically created it automatically from the Greek, so they always use the same words in the same places, and there's a very systematic way that they've kind of translated things, but they also add in words, and the same in the King James. You have words in there which are not in the Greek, but they put them in to make it flow a little bit better in English, and in this view of the Bible, I've made those words very faded out, because I find in most places that you can read the verse without reading in the added word, and it makes a lot of sense, and it kind of opens up other meanings to the verse as well. And so here you can see in this verse, and the nations were angry, and your wrath has come, and the time of the dead to be judged, and to give the reward to your bondservants, the prophets and the holy ones, and to those who fear your name, to the little and the great, and to decay those who are corrupting the earth. So that makes quite good sense when you miss out these words. And I've often found that missing out the words is very easy to understand what the verse is saying. So that's how I tend to read it, and only read the word if I need to.